Hi YouTube, it's your boy Crafty TV. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're checking out my full build guide for the Shockwave Viking in Season 6. Unleash earth-shattering power with the Shockwave Viking, a brutal melee build that sends devastating shockwaves through the battlefield. This setup revolves around Shockwave, slamming the ground to create powerful ripples that damage and stagger enemies in a wide area. With high physical damage, excellent crowd control, and the raw force of a Viking warrior, this build thrives in the thick of battle, crushing everything in its path. In the guide, we'll cover the best skills, gear, and strategies to maximize your Shockwave Viking, ensuring that you turn every battle into a rumble. Swing hard, shake the earth, and let nothing stand in your way. A quick disclaimer before we get started. This build guide was created during the closed beta phase of Season 6 and is based on the content mechanics that were available at that time. Please note that certain features, balance changes, or other game elements may be updated or modified as the game progresses towards its official release. The information presented here may not fully reflect the final version of the game, and some aspects could be subject to change. While I tried to provide the most accurate and effective build recommendations, future adjustments by the developers may impact the viability of certain strategies and builds. Always refer to the official patch notes for the latest insights. Starting with the pros and cons. First, we have really high crowd control and really good AoE. You have built in passives for both defense, resistances, and movement speed. You also gain access to combat orders. This is going to allow you to not only buff yourself, but you can buff your entire group with life percent and mana percent. It's quite a lot, actually. You also have easy sustain of your life and mana through leech mechanics, and Viking is the only class in the game that currently can dual wield two-handed weapons. Now, leveling a Shockwave Viking is really best done as an arcane caster until level 60 whenever you get access to some good weapons and the augment for Shockwave. You can level it as physical if you would like to, but I just recommend it's to do it as arcane. It's a bit easier. It's also kind of tough to cap resistances on a class that uses two-handed weapons because you're missing out on a shield and you really don't have a good movement ability early. You have a charge, but I really don't like charge. I guess you can consider that a movement skill. It does kind of let you go quick. I just don't like it personally. I run into stuff all the time because I have skill issues, but there's not really directly a teleport ability early on. Now, if you are enjoying these guides, do consider donating to the channel. I will have a link to my donation link in the description of the video. Again, I do appreciate anybody that is supporting the channel. You guys are awesome. Moving on to the skill trees, we are not going to be leveling as physical. We're going to be leveling as an arcane caster. That's the left side of the tree or the shield bearer side of the tree. Again, you can choose to go physical if you'd like to, but that's going to be on you. So we're actually going to start from levels 1 through level 7. We're going to be putting points into Seismic Slam. You could put points into Charge if you would like to. Both of these are fine. I kind of prefer going Seismic Slam right at the beginning, but it's up to you. At level 8, we're going to respec, put 1 point into Charge. This is going to allow us to dash around. Then the rest of our points we're going to put into Devastating Charge. This is going to make it so that our charge has an AoE on it whenever we hit monsters. And this AoE is what's actually going to kill most of the trash pretty easily for us. It's actually really good AoE. Now, once we move on to level 16, you can see we're going to continue putting points into Devastating Charge, getting as much damage on this as we can. What's great about this skill is you can put as many points into this as you want, and it's not going to increase your mana costs because you're using charge as a method of delivery. So as long as you don't put too many points into charge, the mana cost on this is basically free, and then you get all the damage from the passive, which is really nice. At level 24, we are going to respec. We'll put 20 points into Odin's Fury, 1 point into charge for movement. The rest we're going to put into combat orders. Combat orders is not only a synergy, but it also is going to give us life and mana percent. It's going to make us a bit more tanky. This Odin's Fury is a lot like Devastating Charge in terms of it has an AoE. The difference is it's kind of like a shout bar. If you've ever played Diablo 2, you kind of just shout in place and a Nova or an AoE goes around you. It'll hit enemies. It's much easier to manage than trying to do the whole charge thing once you hit level 24. At level 60, here's what our tree is going to look like. We're going to switch into our Shockwave build. We'll have 20 points into Shockwave, 20 points into Brutal Force. This is going to not only be a synergy, but it's also going to give us crit and crit damage. We also put points into Weapon Mastery. This is going to give us attack rating as well as attack damage. And then we kind of put some 1 point wonders in here for defenses, defensive shout, our combat orders. Odin's Fury is going to be a debuffer for us. And then our battle agility is going to give us additional movement speed. At level 80, we'll continue putting points into our Weapon Mastery as well as Throw, which is a synergy for Shockwave. It's going to give it more damage. And then our final level 100 Shockwave tree is going to look like this. We'll have 20 points into Shockwave, 20 points into Throw, 20 points into Brutal Force, 20 points into weapon mastery, put 1 point into our 1 point wonder defense, our passives, as well as our Odin's Fury. And then we'll have the rest of our points into Seismic Sand, which is our last synergy for Shockwave. Moving on to sub skill trees. These were a new feature in season 5. This is going to allow you to further augment your skill. You gain 1 point for every 5 character levels for every skill that we have allocated. So in this case, we're going to be able to make a sub skill tree for both Shockwave and Odin's Fury. So in order to access this tree, you're simply just going to click on this plus sign next to the skills, and that will open up a new window that kind of looks like this star here. So here's what our Shockwave tree is going to look like. This is what I prefer to go for whenever you're farming, right? You're just going to go for maximum trails as well as the most AoE. And then this node here is going to give us increased damage to stunned enemies. Shockwave just innately has a stun built into it. So we're going to be stunning a lot. And we're going to get increased damage from that passive. And then this big node to the left here, this is our augment. This is what's going to make it so that whenever we hit the ground, these shockwaves are going to go in multiple different directions. So this is what I prefer to use for our farming setup. Now, Odin's Fury is used as a debuff. This thing is insane. When you take this top right node, this makes monsters take 60% increased damage from both bleeding and burning. It's two separate multipliers. So it's 120% increased damage taken if they're burning and bleeding. You will pretty much always be bleeding because you're doing physical damage. So we do put 1 point here just to ensure the bleed, so you don't have to try and proc it. And then we put 1 point over here into the burn to ensure that you're getting the burn. So every time you use this skill, any monsters in that radius, which we take some increased area of effect as well, are going to be applied with a burn and a bleed. And they're going to take 120% increased damage from your other sources, which is crazy, right? Now, right here, this one is going to give us a ton of movement speed. So every few seconds, you can use Odin's Fury to give yourself a boost of speed. Be really nice whenever you're farming. As far as attributes go, while we're leveling, skills can be quite expensive to use. So you're going to want to dump some points into energy, as well as get some life on kill, mana on kill, some leech whenever you hit level 60 and you're in the shockwave setup. Getting leech can really help as well. So while you're leveling with charge and Odin's Fury, you're going to put 2 points intelligence, 2 points vitality, and then the rest into energy to feel comfortable, right? So try and getting, I don't know, 200, 300 mana early on can feel really good. There are other ways that you can get mana through like charms and gear and stuff, but having a bit more mana is going to make the build feel much more comfortable to play early on. Now, once we swap to Shockwave, we are going to respec our attributes. We're going to go 2 points into strength, 2 points into vitality. Once again, enough energy to feel comfortable. Generally, by this point, you probably have some source of mana leech. You're not going to need very much, but having like 60 mana is really not enough in a situation where maybe you're missing, right? And then you're kind of SOL because you didn't get the leech off. So it is still worth putting maybe a few points into energy just to have somewhat of a mana pool. Or if you have some items that are giving some mana, then you don't need to. But once you get into the end game, all of this should be fixed and you will be dumping all of your points into strength to get the most attack damage. All right, so moving on to the gearing section. This section is really just designed to give you workable suggestions on what gear to acquire at different stages of the game. You as a player can need to look at your current gear and figure out what options will make sense for you. Starting with our Odin's Fury leveling, for most of leveling, you're really going to be searching for rare and mythic items that will match your character's damage type, but you may come across some satanics that will make sense to use, like some arcane skill damage related satanics. I can't guarantee that you're going to drop any of these, so I'm not going to be suggesting any satanics while we level, but just keep an eye out. If you do find something that makes sense for you to use for the build, it's totally okay to pop that on instead. So rune words are nearly guaranteed while you're leveling, just because you get the runes for free basically by doing your Act 1 normal, nightmare, and hell quests, and then you'll use the prospect station to downgrade those runes into ones that you need. But just make sure that you check the level requirement for the rune and the level requirement of the base that you're using when making a rune word to make sure that you meet both of those. So for weapons, we're really just looking for normal through mythic items that have sources of arcane skills or all skills, arcane skill damage, or magic skill damage percentage, right? This is a more damage multiplier. This is flat damage or base damage for the skill. You also have things like faster cast rate. If you're casting more, you're doing more damage. Intelligence will give us magic skill damage. Armor is a good way to mitigate damage, right? Energy will give us some additional mana so that we can spam our skill more often, those sorts of things, right? So you're really just looking for different affixes on items to help your character as you level up. Now, Viking has a cool little tidbit that it can do. Since you can wear two-handed weapons, you can make two sky songs and, like, say, two-handed swords. axes or maces, and you can have +6 to skills with a 70% faster cast rate. That's really strong to be able to use while you're leveling. So if you're able to find a couple weapons, a couple white weapons to make Sky Song in, that could be a really great option. Same thing goes for offhands. If you're unable to find the dual wielding two handers, you are going to look for just these sorts of affixes on your items, as well as you can make Sky Song and a shield as well. You can also make Divine Contemplation. This will give you a lot of resistances. For helmets, same thing for affixes. You could also make a scholar. For chests, you can find things like movement speed on chests. You can also find damage reduced by. That's a really strong damage reduction mod. Otherwise, you could go for Shadow. This will give you a bunch of movement speed and faster cast rate. Or Angle Oxawana. This can give you a ton of skills with Arcane Skill Damage and Pen. Angle Oxawana is a really nice chest. However, because we are switching off of Arcane into Physical around level 60, this might not be worth using the runes on. You kind of have to make that judgment for yourself. Gloves, belts, rings, amulets, and charms. All of these, you're really just looking for just rare mythics, just whatever you can find that makes sense. Trying to get a lot of life on your character, that sort of thing. Now, once we hit level 60, we are going to be swapping out a Shockwave. The most important piece of gear that you need to obtain before switching to Shockwave is your weapon. If you have a shit weapon, you're going to do shit damage, right? Everything revolves around the attack damage of your weapon in order for a physical attack based build to do damage. So at this point, you should really already be at Nightmare. If you aren't, go get to Nightmare, right? Go to Act 1, Rat Den, kill some monsters, get to level 60, find bases, find rune words, find what you need, but do not swap to Shockwave until you're able to make an S tier rune word weapon. It's just going to make your experience way, way better. Again, you're going to make that in either a Malice, a Sky Song. Either one of these are perfectly fine. You'll make them in two-handed weapons. Viking can dual wield two-handers. You can make one Malice, one Sky Song, two Malices. Doesn't matter what you want to do. I would recommend probably going two Malice just because you get ignore target defense on these Malices, which it's 60% of your ignore target defense. You get tons of leech. It's just a really good weapon, but I can kind of see why you might want to go Sky Song just to have one for the mana. You don't have to worry about your sustain as much. And you also get some skills. So either one of these are perfectly fine. For helmets, you do want to make yourself a Flesh Ripper. Super easy. You get a bunch of crit chance. You get a bunch of attack speed. You get a ton of all res. Just very nice. Completely cheap to make. The Yim and a Nut rune are nothing. You'll be able to make those. There are some satanics that I have listed in the written guide that you can check out as well. If you're able to find one of those. For chest pieces, we are looking for to either make a Mayhem or a Gladstone Goose. I would probably recommend you go the Gladstone Goose because you get up to 52% all resistances on it. And that's a lot coming into next season. 52% is a lot. Mayhem can also be decent. You get a bunch of res. You do get some attack speed and some enhanced damage. But I still would almost recommend just going the Gladstone. It's so good early on. For gloves, we are looking for enhanced damage, crit damage gloves. You could also find some with attack speed. More attacks is more damage. Since they remove the cap on attack speed, getting a ton of attack speed is going to really boost up your damage. For boots, you're going to make quick steps. Yimdell, super cheap. You'll get a ton of movement speed. You'll get attack speed. You'll get leech. You'll get everything that you need. These boots are just really freaking good. Make them. You'll zoom around. Belts, looking for crit damage belts, attack speed belt. Any of this stuff is perfectly fine. Rings, crit damage, enhanced damage, attack speed. Just any of this stuff is great to get on a mythic ring while you're leveling up. Same for amulets, enhanced damage, attack speed, crit damage. And charms, again, same thing. Enhanced damage charms are so strong. You can also get tons of resistances in there. You can get life and life percent. I remember whenever I did my life stacking Viking, I had 10,000 life by level 100. Like I just hit level 100. I had 10,000 life. You can get so much life for free if you just look for it on your charms. Now, once we hit level 100, there's not really any best in slot gear at this point. A lot of items can be swapped around for mythics. Kind of depends on what you drop on your mythics, right? So you could really put a combination of any of this stuff together and it would really work because our main goal right now is just getting you through Hell 1 so that you can unlock satanic zones and start farming. So here are some different items that I would recommend that you try to pick up just to help you out during your journey. So we want to look for superior, exceptional, astral, or quantum bases that have additional enhanced damage, all skills, attack speed, attack damage, strength based on level, any of these sorts of quality affixes on your bases can really help boost up your damage. So for those runeward weapons, we do have Aurora's Might, Ravager, Malice. The Ravager and the Aurora's Might now require high runes. Ravager is going to need a key rune. Sorry, Ravager is going to need a Sur rune, and Aurora's Might is going to need a key rune. So these are now, I mean, that's still for most people a day one pickup. Getting an early high rune is not really too difficult. Otherwise, just continue using your Malice and just to look for a better base Malice. You could also pick up a Nomad Sand Slicer. These will probably be fairly cheap at the start of the season. They have a ton of attack damage. You could wear two of these, right? You get movement speed on them. You get crushing blow. You get more target defense ignore. It's actually really good. If you would like to go Shadow Carver, you can. I don't. I don't necessarily recommend you go the Shadow Carver route just because Viking gets so much crit built into his kit already that it just becomes fairly easy to crit cap and kind of go that direction. And Shadow Carver, though it is a very high attack damage and you have the Reaper's Coin where you can't miss, and like it is a really good weapon, it makes it so that you can't crit, which is kind of the whole reason for playing Viking early. So that's up to you. You can go the Shadow Carver variant, but keep in mind that you cannot crit. So some of the gear recommendations that I have here are going to be based on you going a crit version. For helmets, you should be in that Flesh Ripper. If you're not, get into the Flesh Ripper. You get a ton of crit chance. You get the attack speed. You're probably still going to be rocking that Flesh Ripper just because like the options that we have here, like Colossal Avenger, Assassins, Judge and Jury, like none of these really are that much better than even a Flesh Ripper just because this gives you that crit on it and the all res. But if you end up finding like an assassin's hood that's got 3 skills on it up to 15 res, like this is still really good. I don't mean to downplay how strong some of these other satanics can be. For chests, that mayhem, that Gladstone Cuse are still really good. At this point, you can also find Cocoon of the Berserker. This has skills on it, has double leech, it has up to 100 enhanced damage and some sockets. So you could put a bunch of runes in it or whatever just to get some resistances. That can be a good option as well. For gloves, I prefer going Siege Breakers. This gives you up to 25% ignore target defense. If you're dual wielding Malices and throw on a Siege Breaker, that would take care of your ignore target defense. But there are some other options in here that you could go as well. Or you could just simply look for a pair of mythics that have enhanced damage on them. For boots, we have Quick Steps, Arena Master Marchers, Hermes boots. Quick Steps are just so freaking good, honestly. I probably wouldn't even go off for Quick Steps, but you could go Hermes boots. I can see some reason for that for going up to 40 res. Belt, Brute Scored can be your best choice. You get a ton of additive physical damage. You get a ton of crit chance, a ton of crit damage, ignore target defense, strength. Brute Scourge is going to be a really, really good option. Butcher's Belt also being a good option with up to 30 res and 3 skills. I can see a lot of reason for going that. Really, any of these belts will serve you just fine. As well as you could look for a mythic that has enhanced damage on it. Rings. So rings are going to be a little tough. You're most likely going to be on a mythic for a while that has enhanced damage on it. Maybe finding a ring with like crit damage, that sort of thing. You want to try to get into Elven Graces. It's just going to be a little bit hard because they nerf the drop rate of them. But these are going to have a ton of crit chance on them as well as crit damage. So try to get into Elven Graces. The next best option would be your ring of Co-Ravens. These also have crit chance on them and some crit damage. And then also Coda Wedding Bands can be a good pickup just because they give you a ton of movement speed they'll blast around with. The Coda Wedding Bands are going to be really good if you go the Shadow Carver route just because you don't need the crit. So yeah, that's kind of the rotation that you have for early rings. Amulets, it's the same idea. You're going to go Ravenclaw. It's what you want. However, the drop rate is low. So you're probably going to end up running a mythic that has enhanced damage on, like a high amount of enhanced damage. You might get lucky and get some crit damage with it as well. Otherwise, you can go an all-seeing eye with a bunch of skills. It's a magic find. For charms, looking for charms with any of these affixes on them are fantastic. Crit damage, enhanced damage, skills. It'll be a bit harder to find skills for Vikings specifically, but they do exist. using your charms to help cap out your resistances, getting life percentage, attack speed, movement speed. Enhanced defense can also be very strong, especially when you pick, maybe you made a Gladstone on like a high defense base, and then you get some enhanced defense and charms, and you help multiply that defense. This is a global multiplier on charms that can be really strong. So any of this stuff is just good to get on charms. I also have a list of a ton of budget. Um, I didn't even shouldn't even really say budget. These Some of these charms are going to be a bit more expensive, but these are just regular S tier charms for the most part. So picking up any of these can really help round out the build. Like for example, the Anubis, the Beetle of Life, and the Hardened Steel Defender. The amount of life that you get between these, Anubis' Zonk, by the way, has been buffed. It's now up to almost 900 life, with up to I believe 20% here. I know Hardened Steel goes to 20%. So it's just the amount of life that you get from these charms is crazy. Throwing on a Witch's Claw, that solves all of your leech problems for mana, right? Getting some attack speed from Adventurer Quiver and Raider's Torch, like any of these would serve you just fine. Now, moving on to the mid game, for physical attackers, there's a lot of things that you need to balance in order to maximize your DPS. To kind of going through this a little bit, first is the attack damage of your weapon. This matters more than anything else to your damage. Everything in terms of your damage is scaling off of this number on your weapon. So if you have a shit weapon, you're going to do shit damage. Another thing that's important here is the attacks per second. This is based on the increased attack speed of the weapon itself. You have your base, and then it's multiplied by the increased attack speed on the weapon itself. This is a local mod. It's directly increasing the APS of your weapon. It's very strong. So putting things like moonstones in your weapon is going to be a bigger damage multiplier than some other socketables, just because it's giving you literally more hits. It's crazy. So you want to make sure that you have a high attack damage and that you have good APS. Now you can continue increasing your APS through percentual increased attack speed on other pieces of gear, like gloves and rings and stuff like that. Ignore target defense is your bread and butter for managing your hit chance. You want to hit 75%, ignore target defense. That way you are making sure that you're hitting. You also can multiply your damage with crit damage and increasing your critical strike damage, right? So crit chance and crit damage. You can get 95% crit chance, and there's no cap on crit damage or diminishing return. So go crazy, get as much crit damage as you can. Some other important affixes that people don't know about or think about is Deadly Blow. This increases your physical damage by 50%, and you can get 100%, right? So 100% of the time, you're increasing your fizz damage by 50%. It's a very strong stat. You want to have 100% Deadly Blow, or work on getting that as you're gearing up into the mid game. Same thing goes for Crushing Blow. This isn't as important, right? But it does make it so that monsters will be inflicted with armor break, making them take 10% increased damage per stack. That'd be 50% increased damage taken. So getting a source of Crushing Blow is still good. The same goes for Open Wounds. A lot of people don't directly prioritize it, but it does cause monsters to bleed for 20% of your physical damage, and it's good for tanky targets and bosses. So now that we kind of know how we can scale up our damage, obviously all this will whole thing will be in the written guide. You can read through it if you want some additional information on how, to scale up your damage. For weapons, there's going to be a lot of different weapon options here, right? And some of them are going to prioritize different things. Like maybe some of them are really good for just raw damage output. Some of them are going to be good for attack speed. Some of them are more crit related. It's really going to come down to you taking a look at that weapon and looking at your gear, looking at your stat sheet, and figuring out, okay, does this weapon check all the boxes? Or can I get this weapon to check all the boxes? Or if I put this weapon on, how does the rest of my gear pan out, and how will I have to change to my other gear? It's not just this weapon best weapon, right? I get that question a lot where people will ask me, hey, is glow stick better than Lucy? Well, it's not that simple, right? It depends on the rest of your gear, and it also depends on your play style and how you want to play that character and what content you're farming. So with that being said, Thorn of Noxus is a new weapon to Season 6. It has an absolutely stupid amount of attack damage on it, but it has really low APS. And with the changes to attack speed, it's never going to be super high. However, it having such a high amount of attack damage on it, with 6 sockets, the ignore target defense, the deadly blow, just everything about it, this is still a monster of a weapon that you should consider picking up. Next would be Lucy Days. You can dual wield these Lucy Days. They're very strong. They did get nerfed in season 6, but they're still just really well rounded. They have the attack speed, they have the skills, they have the extra damage of bleeding monsters. Everything about them is really strong. You could also dual wield your glow sticks. These will give you a ton of attack speed or attacks per second. It is a bit less now, but these are typically used for whenever you're just speed farming. You could also, if you found, really good bases for Ravager or Malice or whatever, you could make these rune words and continue using those. And then your best option here is going to be dual wielding Rakul Legion Crushers. These you get from King Rakul in the Chaos Tower, right? These can roll this Unholy stat. So you can see I rolled the Mana Leech, and I rolled extra damage to stunned monsters. These can change. Every time you drop this, it'll be a different one. So maybe I'll get increased attack speed. Maybe I'll get, I don't know, some ignore target defense, some additional ignore target defense, whatever it may be. This changes for every single one of these that drops. It can make for some very unique items. Obviously, for these weapons, you're going to put moonstones in them to try to get additional attacks per second, scale up your damage. And maybe, for whatever reason, you need to put in like a Zoe rune to get your deadly blow or whatever it may be. So ignore target defense to hit that cap. Again, you are a Viking, so you can dual wield two-handers. And that's generally what you're going to do for these weapons. For helmets, Legionnaire is going to be our best option. It's going to give us the enhanced damage, skills, deadly blow. Try and make this on a skills helmet or a crit damage helmet. If you can't find the Drax for this, you could also go for a Chimera. This is kind of an in-between option between Flesh Ripper and Legionnaire. It's new to season 6. You could go for Chimera. Really, you want to get into that Legionnaire. The Live by the Sword proc is going to give you a ton of attack speed and movement speed. You really want that. You could also pick up a Nikita's. This gives you a shitload of deadly blow skills. This is a good option as well. For chests, we have Executioner's Cocoon. This is your most offensive chest. Skills, double leech, 275 enhanced damage, res. It's just going to be your best option. Fortress is also really nice. It's kind of a step between a Cocoon and Executioner. Fortress gives you 250 enhanced damage. You still get a ton of resistances on it, right? And some deadly blows. Fortress is a great option. And then I did list some additional chests that could be good. Heaven's Might, Azarius's, Leviathan's Carcass. These are all really good just chests if you end up finding them or if you can pick them up pretty cheap. They can serve you pretty well. For gloves, Brawler Fighter Mitts. Pick these up from Sung Lee. He's the Uber boss in the Eternal Battlefields. This gives you a ton of increased attack damage. So if you get a 4 version of it, it's really, really nice. You get some attack speed. You'll want Brawler Mitts. Otherwise, Ally Boxing Gloves can be okay as well. If you can't pick up either one of these, then you're just going to want to use a crit enhanced damage pair of mythics. For boots, make Crush Fleets. They're really strong. There's really nothing better here until you can get into some angelics. Until you get to the angelic rune words. You get this agility proc. This is a ton of movement speed and attack speed. For belts, you can go for a belt of skulls. This will help you maybe round out your deadly blow. You do get some extra damage to bleeding monsters, which is a really strong stat. Movement speed, it's a good option. You want to start farming King Rakul, not only for your weapons, but to try to get Gladiator King's belt. This will give you an absolute shitload of extra damage to bleeding monsters. It's a very strong belt. For rings, if you haven't made it into your Elven Graces yet, get your Elven Graces. If you still can't get your Elven Graces, it might be worth your time to try to get a +3 Azazels. But this is probably going to be more expensive than the Graces, I would imagine. So probably going to be in the Graces before you go for a +3 Azazel. But that would be the next thing you would want to farm for is a +3 Azazel. And then you will go farm your Anubis Soul Gems to make your Azazel Despair Rings. And then you find a Rakul Ritual Band from King Rakul from the Chaos Tower to mirror it. So you can have 2 of these Azazels, which are your best in slot rings. Outside of that, you could still rock a enhanced damage ring with crit damage, that sort of thing, attack speed. For amulets, if you're not in a Ravenclaw, get a Ravenclaw. The next thing up from that would be a Griffin Claw. It's basically the same thing, just gets more crit chance and more crit damage attributes. Eagle Claw can also be a decent option. And this just can be farmed from Luna. For charms, we have crit strike chance and critical strike damage charms. You can also find these with enhanced damage on them. It's going to be rare, right? You can see I have a enhanced damage crit damage charm. Very, very rare, but they can be dropped. Just to make you aware. From there, you also want to get a tablet of the awakening. This can help you with your resistances, or you can put a bunch of attributes in it. And then I have a list of all the budget charms. If you haven't picked up these yet, now would be a good time to do that. All right. When it comes to min maxing a character, there's going to be a lot of variables to consider, as well as people have different play styles and goals. Season 6 has introduced a new item called the Satanic Crystal. This is going to allow you to either add a new affix to the item or destroy it. So there's going to be more min maxing that I can't account for with these affixes that you can slam onto items. So I do have a build that I have, tested and I've refined myself. That's what we're seeing on the screen here. So this build is my personal preference. However, you might have a different preference or may want to change the build up for a specific encounter or maybe a boss, whatever it may be. But there might be a more optimal variation of it depending on your playstyle, the zone that you're tackling, or the bosses that you're facing. Feel free to experiment and adapt. The guides is really only serving as a foundation, but the best build here is the one that works for you. So here is a snapshot of the gear that I have on in the footage. Now, the only difference here, I do have a Gabriel's chest on with a Side of the Gods that I'm using for farming. And I do believe, yep, I could talk about that in here in my full list that I use Gabriel to convert my attack speed into faster cast rate, and then we'll use Execution Cocoon for a single target. And then for our helmet, we're a Side of the Gods that we use for teleporting. If we're not going to use that, then we would go for like a High Roller Death Crown, a Legionnaire, any of that sort of stuff. Here's a full list of all my gear. For relics, twin blade, nunchucks, razor blade, butterfly knife. There's really nothing better than this. This is 100% what you'll want to go. You may drop one of these to go for a Triforce to get some res, but the res is only 10% now. I don't even think I would go it. I honestly would just stick with these. For potions, here's a list of some different potions you might want to get into. Berserker Rage will increase your damage. Rad Bull will give you attack speed and movement speed. This will also be FCR because it'll convert. Elixir of Unworldly Cognition will give you increased experience if you're trying to, push a bunch of hero levels or race in hero levels. This could be a good option. This is now an SS tier potion. Witch's Potion is your oh shit life and mana button. Golden Inlaid Mysterious Potion gives you Magifying and Gold Find. This is now an angelic potion. Empty Bottle of Vodka will give you plus skills, and Battle of Rad will give you some movement speed and phasing. There's also the Maggot Elixir that I don't have listed here at the moment. I will add that. That can give you some additional attack speed and attack damage as well. For chest augments, Berserker Rage is going to be the most damage. Tempest Strike is going to provide you the most attack speed. And Lethal Tempo is going to give you some attack speed with crit damage. Between these two, I still think that Tempest Strikes is going to be your better play, just because at this point you might have your Gabriel chest, and getting your attack speed converted into FCR is going to make teleporting around feel so damn smooth with Tempest Strikes. Even if Lethal Tempo technically ends up being a little bit more damage, I still would augment Tempest Strikes just to have it. Now, you could argue maybe running, Lethal Tempo on your single target setup, but in that case, I still think Berserker Rage outbeats Lethal Tempo. And then if you're in hardcore, Survivor Shield is your cheat death. For hero levels, here's a guide on how to spec your hero level tree. The tree doesn't provide you any character power, generally speaking. It's mainly just utility, and it's also fairly situational. So I have a whole build or a whole video that talks about different paths that you might take based on your character situation. There's different methods that people will go with their hero level tree. Generally speaking, for a crit base fizz attacker, you want to rush charm slots because you want to try and open up as much room as you can for enhanced damage or crit damage, any of that sort of stuff. But there is reasons that you might go different paths. And I kind of talk about those in this video. Same thing for glyphs. Glyphs do not offer any character power. They are all utility. They really are just there to enhance your gameplay. So making their deciding which ones you're going to use are really just going to be preference based, and it's going to depend on what content that you want to engage with. So I do have a link in the description for this video as well that shows you all of the glyphs and what they do. For your mercenary, we are using the Act 1 Knight Mercenary. Currently in season 6, mercs are just magic find ore bots. That's not going to change. They're just magic find ore bots, guys. So we run this tree. I put 1 point into everything. I take the damage reduction. I take the life per hit, the regen, and the armor just to make them as tanky as I can, so that then we can then throw on as much magic find as we can on them. Here's a list of just some different weapons that you would want to use to give them as much magic find as you can. You could also go with Valkyrie or Aurora's Might. Aurora's Might's going to give them a giant res aura. So whenever they're around you, they'll give you additional resistances. I would not recommend this for hardcore. I honestly don't recommend this in general because if your merc dies, then you don't have res, which they will. And then the other option is Valkyrie. This used to give you an insane amount of attack speed. It's now like 20. Oh shit. It was like 22 or 25% at level 36. So I don't know. I still think at that point I would just go for the magic find options. Same thing for chests, magic find chests. Same thing for helmets, just a magic find helmets. And same thing for offhands. These are just a bunch of magic find offhands. You're going to want to socket Istrunes and all of this stuff just to get as much magic find on your mercenary as you can. So that magic find applies to you as well. Now for loot filters, I'm going to show you how to easily highlight items with the loot filter. So you're going to press escape, go to options, gameplay, loot filter. Your screen will look like this here. On the right side, we're just going to look for a physical attacker. That's what we will select for our highlight preset. And then for our filter settings on the left side, you'll see there's the normal, nightmare, early hell, mid-game hell, end-game hell filter presets. You're simply just going to click on the preset based on what difficulty you're in. So if you're in normal, you'll click on normal. If you're in nightmare, you'll click on nightmare and just kind of follow that. I am going to have my own filters that I'm going to make for season 6. I'm going to make a video showing you how to build the filter yourself in game. So that if you want to go with a filter that I would recommend, I will have that available. Unfortunately, I don't have a way to make that filter currently and it be ready and available for you to use on season 6, just because whenever the game updates, it sometimes will break the filters. So I would rather just make one video that just explains how you can quickly add in your own highlight filter and how you can add in your own filter for later, like as you level up in the game, as well as I will have some end game filters available for you guys to use. So I will have that in the description once that video is ready. Now, if you're new to Hero Siege or you've seen some additional information, I do have this whole section available that will give you some additional information on understanding the basics of Hero Siege. First is my ultimate beginner guide. This is a 2.5 hour video. I have links to practically any and everything that you would want to know about Hero Siege. So be sure that you check that out. If you're a newer player, bookmark it. Will help you if you're like wanting to know what an angelic key does. I have a link that you can, or a timestamp that you can click on to go learn about that information. Before you get started in Hero Siege, I do recommend that you equip your companion. Everybody gets a companion for free. This will help you pick up loot. Make sure you set up your highlight filter. Configure some of your controls. Here's an example of mine. I also suggest that you change your minimap hotkey to tab. This will make your minimap overlay permanent like D2 and PoE. Swap your FPS to 60 FPS. This will dramatically help your performance. And then I show you, you can left click on this right skill here and then click on a skill. This is how you will put skills on your actual bar. Now, while you're leveling, there's a difference between additive damage and skill damage. Early on, while you're leveling with Odin's Fury, you're going to want to look for arcane skill damage. This is the only affix that will affect your Odin's Fury in terms of flat damage. Additive damage does not work for spells, right? The same thing applies to physical skills. There's physical skill damage that will work with Shockwave. Additive damage will also work for Shockwave. However, it's a bit different. It's technically working for the hit of your actual weapon. So essentially, additive damage, okay for the first like 3 acts of the game. After that, it becomes kind of useless. When we talk about zones to farm, there are places in the game that you could go to get some additional experience or to help you gear up. I have some of those listed here. You're welcome to check out in the written guide when it's available. There's the different places that you might want to go to help level up and get some gear. Mainly, it's just Rat Den or 3-3. It's what we call it. Dry Hill, Sand Cave, or Moss Ratham Dungeon. Um, any of those are good places just to go to get some additional XP or gear if you're having trouble. Now, while you are leveling, there are no required quests to complete the game. However, there are some reasons that you might want to do the quests. You can help get some early supplies to make rune words. So, Act 1 Normal, Act 1 Nightmare, Act 1 Hell, all of these quests will give you runes. They're also very fast to complete. Your Act 1 Normal quests will also give you a 15% movement speed charm and a 40% movement speed potion. This will be really nice on the Viking because it'll just help us zoom through the early levels quickly. If you're interested in learning more about season 6, I do have a link to the official season 6 patch notes in the description. This is estimated to start on March 14th at 7 a.m. So be sure you check out the 900 line patch notes to kind of get an idea of what's new in season 6. Also linked in the description is the official Hero Siege wiki. This is maintained by some of the mods and players in the Hero Siege community. They put a ton of information in here and they've worked their butts off to try to keep it as updated as they can. So if you need some additional information, or maybe you just want to check out, another source of information, this is a really good place to get it. Now, once you hit level 100, I do have an early game tips and tricks video that will give you a ton of different things that you can do at level 100. This is a whole video that I go through all of this information in a full written guide format. I will also, in that video, there's the written guide here available that you can read through if you prefer doing that. There's a ton of things that you can do whenever you hit level 100. Also linked in the description is the Hero Siege helper. Be sure you bookmark this. This just has a ton of different information on it, from in-game dungeons to what keys go to certain dungeons, affixes on items. He's working on a build simulator. There's a ton of really cool stuff on this app. I would recommend bookmarking it. And lastly, I will have all of my builds for season 6 linked in the description of the videos. That way you can check out any of my other content or my other builds that I have available. And with that, that is going to wrap up our full build guide for the Shockwave Viking in season 6. Be sure to like and subscribe to this channel to keep up to date with all of my future Hero Siege related content and news. Come check me out live at twitch.tv/Galaxy_TV. We are going to be working on a tier list for season 6 for leveling in an endgame soon. So that'll be really fun. We'll be doing that live. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.